Hello, welcome to the Stoic Poetry Podcast. My name is Kurt, and this is episode 6 of season 3. Greetings. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 stones and one special piece of metal. The stones I use to remind me that I have something to talk about tonight, although I don't usually remember what those things are, although a pattern is beginning to emerge. And it's getting a little easier, but so unique topics that aren't part of that pattern get distinguished by large stones or objects that aren't stones, like this piece of metal that I found out in the desert. Curious thing. Let me open up my big old growler. Today we have from the Calico Cidery. This is a, what is this? Dreamland, it's called. Hard cider. There we go. Pour myself a swig. A healthy swig. To enjoy. Oh, it's fizzing. I don't know if you could hear it, but it fizzes because it's so fresh from the cidery. All right, let's begin. Can you hear that? Not the dog. Not the fire, or rather not hear it. There's no more crickets. The season of the crickets closing their wings has arrived, as Ricky has taught us from the Japanese tradition, and it's arrived here in the California desert. Crickets are gone. Another interesting, noteworthy thing from the seasons is that for the first time since records have been kept about the snowfall on Mount Fuji, which is something that I used to do when I lived in Shizuoka. I would walk to work every day, back and forth, and I could have a beautiful view of Mount Fuji. I would look for that first day, to mark that first day, usually in October, when snow arrived on Mount Fuji. It was a noteworthy day. And it's interesting that today is the 31st day of October, Halloween, here in the United States. It's already Halloween is past. It's November now in Japan, and there's no snow on Mount Fuji. This is the first time this has happened since the records were kept regarding this snowfall for like 160 years. So another interesting seasonal noteworthy event. All right. The first stone tonight, I'm going to talk a little bit about my friends in the Gaijin Twitter podcast collective and the things that we're up to, the state of our little group, nascent as it is. Well, we've continued our cadence of weekly discourse in our voice chat sessions, although this week there were fewer people in attendance probably due to the fact that it fell on Halloween in Japan. People were up to other things. We're pretty active in our little chat on the X platform, as limited as that platform is for tools, which I guess just goes to prove that what really facilitates human connection aren't the tools, but the circumstance and company, right? You could sit and talk all night long to a companionable person met in a lowly pub, more so than an hour's worth of forced companionship in a highfalutin bar where the connection just wasn't there and the environment just didn't feel right. Now, we do have our Discord server as well, and it's not any fault of Discord's that's not the case. It's just that it doesn't have that same feel to it. And so there's something about being the first and the original. I mean, the space that we have on X. It's like when I would go to the beach when I lived in Huntington Beach, and every day after work, I would go to Lifeguard Tower 23 on 17th Street to do my daily ocean plunge and swim, which was randomly picked the first time I went. But for the year and a half that I lived there and the nearly daily plunge that I took, I always went to exactly the same spot in front of that lifeguard tower, quite cognizant of the fact of my routine and the how that could be perceived as a rut. Why not go down the beach to lifeguard tower 15, for example, and give that a try? Because that's not the one. That's not where I found this routine. That's not where the connection was established. That was not my place to do that thing. So too, even though Discord is a good place, the place for us to talk as a community is in our little X chat room. As wonky as it is, it's like a party line on an old telephone. You know, if you get on board, there's different voices talking, and if you stray away for a couple of hours, you can't keep up with the threads or who's talking about what. I wanted to talk about an incident that happened today that was revealing to me of the level of the maturity within the group. So we don't have any rules. We rely pretty much on the good nature of the people who are a part of the group and the companionable personalities and sensitive disposition that we all seem to have as part of who we are. It's curious that brought us together. I wonder if some ways that's kind of what brought us together, if that's the sieve that through which we were filtered from the X platform at large. Because humans do that, right? I mean, we find our own. We look for others that seem to be a good match for conversation and spending time together. So I guess it shouldn't surprise me that the incident that happened this afternoon happened the way it did, which is basically this. I go every evening to Julian, a town about a 45-minute, 50-minute drive from here. I go there to take the dog for a walk, to get his companionship out there, to see other people, and for me a little bit of the same. Nice, pleasant place. A little old West Town style community famous for apple pie and apple cider. That's where I picked up this growler. I do that every Thursday. I bought this growler for $6 from Julian Ciderly, and I stop by every Thursday when I go to Julian ahead of this podcast to get a refill. They know me there, and they give me the locals discount. Anyway, while I was there was Halloween was going underway. Kids were wandering the streets with their parents, teenagers, etc., and some adult parties too. And I came across a couple from Spain who were the young man was so proud of his Halloween costume, which I struck up a conversation because his costume was so unique and singular, unlike anything I'd ever seen. It seemed to be an exact replica of what I would have imagined a World War II German uniform would look like. Exactly what I would picture it to look like. And I complimented him on his costume. I said, "That's a heck of a costume." I said, "That's an amazing replica." And he says, "It's no replica." So in his Spanish accent, he explained to me that the uniform had belonged to his grandfather, who was an SS officer from Spain, working in conjunction with the Germans, and that this had been passed down to him, this uniform with all of the accessories. He had them all in the trunk, all the gear, etc., but he didn't put all that on for fear that it might be a little over the top. So he dressed it with his big coat, the belt with the buckle on it, and he had his helmet with the SS emblazoned on it, and his boots, etc., the original boots, everything. Quite a sight. And the woman, who was, I don't know if they were married or whatnot, but they were definitely together. She was dressed up like a German lass. Can't think of a better word. Like, imagine up in the Alps of Germany. I don't know, do they have Alps? And some Dhaka, that's Russian, isn't it? And on leave, the soldier and his lady, and she was dressed that part. She looked like a German. She looked like, I know this is probably Holland, right? What is it? The Heineken girl with the big bosom and carrying the big things of beer. I think I got my countries wrong, but you get the impression. She was dressed like that. They made quite an image. So I took a photo of them together. They came over. They were so companionable. To use that word a third time tonight. It seems to be the companionable edition of the podcast. He shook my hand, and I'm holding Rudy aside because I don't want Rudy to growl. And he's reaching out, taking off his officer's gloves to shake my hand, and I asked if I could take a picture, and I did. Let me throw another log on the fire. Well, warm up to continue the story. So I got the photo, and I asked them for their permission to share it on social media, which I was planning to do. But before I did that, I did something that I've begun more increasingly to do, which is to share good news, to share interesting news with the collective on our X communication platform. So I jumped in there real quick and shared the photo, and I wrote a very non-political, just story, just explaining what I expected. So this is, wow, look at this. It's like this, this young man, etc. All the things I just told you. Now, Joe Ishikawa Summit to Sea made an observation with his British wit that was a little bit political in nature, which immediately brought a protest from others who are not fond of politics in these forums, and neither am I, and I hadn't realized, and I had responded. It made me laugh. It was Joe's a funny guy. His observation was funny, and it made me laugh, and I responded LOL, etc. And here's where it got interesting. In some cases, that could, in online venues and communities, something like that can immediately cause a schism and could be the end of relationships, end of connections, end of companionable communication, end of a community. That didn't happen. There was a couple of what do they call it? Cycles of pause, as we all kind of just digested what had just happened. And forthright, adult, to the point, and very sincere and heartfelt communications came from all parties to settle the waters. And I thought to myself, this is a community that I can really wrap myself around. Because the measure of friendship, I think, in many ways, certainly relationships, deep relationships, isn't how much that we have in common. It's that and our ability to weather the periods when we're struggling and at odds even. And this wasn't even a case of being at odds. It was just a case of kind of trespassing a little bit in areas that are contentious. We all have our opinions. But sometimes some of these things, for me, it's the big three, big four actually. It's politics, religion. Well, I guess it's three: money, the things I don't talk about. Unless you're my wife, my accountant, or my priest. So, kudos to the group. We've weathered a challenge. Other than that, the podcasts this week have come fast and furious. So many good podcasts. Then we welcomed a new member, Mikey, an old-time J-vlog YouTuber, just like me, just like Kevin, an old J-vlogger who podcasts about the accessibility and scene and the challenges of the disabled in Japan. Excellent podcast, excellent perspectives on situations that are uh, in many ways still a little bit behind, I think, the rest of the world in some ways in Japan in terms of infrastructure and politics and human sensitivity. So we welcomed Mikey to the group. So that's the stone for our little collective. Next stone is for the state of the move. So we're now, it's the October 31st. My last day of work is December 12th. My plan is to fly to Japan the following week. Optimally, I'll be flying to Japan on the 18th, arriving on the 20th. Now that seems like 3 days for a direct flight. It's not quite like that. So what'll happen is that the flight departs at like 1 a.m. on the 19th. So I hand off Rudy, who's sitting right there behind me, in his little crate, safe and sound and warm. I drop him off with the pet shipper on like 6 p.m. on the 18th. I'll then drop off the rental car and then make my way to the airport to board the flight for that 1 a.m. flight, and then we arrive the following day in Japan on the 20th. Now, it's a little problematic because everything has to happen just right. Rudy and I need to be on the same flight, although one of the great things about having a pet shipper is that, let's say, for example, we get on the airplane and there's a problem with the pet shipping. There's an agent from the pet shipper that is available to handle that. So let's say I get on the airplane, Rudy either gets on the airplane or is... There's something moving right out there. I don't know if you can hear it. Every time when I'm sitting out here, there's sounds in the dark. Rudy, if something happens and Rudy can't fly on the plane, the pet shipper will take them back. There's a boarding facility right next to the airport, and they'll board him. And this flight that we're using is the same flight every night. They do it every night, so they'll just hold him and send him off on the next flight. So another benefit for going with a professional pet shipper, especially if you're planning to fly with your pet, is what happens if you end up flying away and your pet gets pulled off the airplane. Well, we've got that covered. So the other thing that's even, well, that's the most challenging thing, right? I want to make sure my dog's okay. But another thing to consider is that my entry permit, what the heck is that? I get chills going through me right now. When I tell you, when I get to Japan and I'm done with this desert life, I'm going to have some memories. The dog's not growling, though. But he doesn't growl at the scary stuff. So my certificate of eligibility was issued on October 3rd. That means I have until December 4th to be on the ground in Japan. So it all has to happen. So I can't suffer too much delay at the end. Otherwise, I have to start over again in a way. So this all has to happen. And in between all of that, I need to get rid of the car. I need to find a buyer for the car. I need to secure a rental car. That's it. Really, that's it. I'm already packed. I packed this week. So all of my 2 suitcases are already in the car. That's all so I shouldn't worry. That's all I need to do, and I can pull both those things off. In Japan, on the other hand, probably by this time tomorrow, I expect Yumiko and I will have decided to buy the Machiya house. It's passed all of our criteria. We did a lengthy, almost 2-year search for a house. We visited probably over a dozen houses. No, 13 houses, yeah. And so over a dozen, 13 houses. And this house, I have a little scale and spreadsheet that I use to give houses a score, and it's a 1 to 100 score. This house got a score of 82, I think it is. The only house in the 80s, the number one house on our list. That and the fact that earlier this week, the house received its pre-sale inspection, looking for structural issues, issues with pests, termites, rats, and anything else, vermin of any sort, looking for asbestos, checking the state of the plumbing and the electrical, earthquake preparedness. I think I said asbestos already, important one. And the house came back with a solid, good score. The house is sturdy, solid. They did find some minor termite damage, but nothing major. Now the house is old. It's an old traditional style house, so it's not built to modern earthquake codes. But the past owner who loved the house greatly and took good care of the place actually did retrofit it with earthquake. So it's been attended to help it make it more secure in an earthquake. There's nothing in the way now. So that was yesterday, and Yumiko and I decided to just sit quietly for 48 hours together. Not even talking about it really. And just let the idea sink in. And we will meet tomorrow to make our decision. And I think I can forecast that that decision will be, unless someone else swoops in between now and then to pick it up instead. And that's okay too. If no one has bought it between now and tomorrow, and Yumiko and I decide to go for it, then we will proceed. Something's going on. Anything else on the move? I'm so ready to go. I'm feeling very restless now, and I feel like a dinner guest who stayed too long at the table and knows it. Yet his Uber hasn't arrived to pick him up, and has to linger a little longer through awkward conversation, knowing that his time is up. That's me right now in America. And I feel the same way at work. But at work, a new sensation has arrived. How do I describe it? I haven't talked about it yet. I haven't put it into words. I need to capture it before it's gone. Here it is. Humans need some sort of meaning and a reason to get up and do things. It's nice when that meaning and that reason is pleasant, makes us happy and smile. Yet, it's still fulfilling and nourishing even when it's not happy. It's like we are fulfilled when we have a good meal, maybe a burger and fries and a chocolate shake from In-N-Out that fills us up and nourishes us in a way, but also makes us happy in the process. But we can achieve good ends as well on rations. You know, what do you call them? The rations that you give soldiers. You know, there's a word for it. Not very tasty, not very fulfilling, not very tasty, not very satisfying, but they'll fill you up. They'll give you the nutrients you need, and you can do your thing. It's full. It's not, maybe not. It's filling, if not fulfilling. But even then, it may be fulfilling. So here's the part. At work, I've mentioned this before. Since about a month ago, they've needed me less and less. I show up to these meetings like a ghost, even though just 6 months ago I would have been the leader of the meetings, running the meetings from start to finish. I'm just there kind of as a shadow of myself. because I'm just waiting out the clock now, and the transition has already occurred. The ownership of the things that I do, the projects that I run are complete. The tasks that I have been either assigned to someone else, or this is the hard part, or one of the hard parts, or recognize that no one's going to take it on, because those tasks, those things are only important to me. Sure, will they suffer a little bit 3 or 4 months after I'm gone because they didn't attend to those things? Possibly, but they'll get through it. It's not important to them. It's not important to them to manage things the way that I do. So the artifacts of what I do mean nothing to them. And that's okay. But it's a little bit sobering and a little hard to realize that all at once. And to find that now the sound is over here. And to find that I have become no longer needed. I struggle not to use the word irrelevant. Let me just throw another log out. With all these sounds up there, I need some light and fire. I don't know what's making all that noise. Ooh, it's cold too. So here's the thing. I was getting used to not being needed. But I see something else now, and it just occurred to me this week. My coworkers, by virtue of their engagement, active engagement and commitment, and the knowledge that they're going to be part of something into next year and beyond, they're fulfilled in a way. In the same way that maybe a farmer would be fulfilled in tending to his crops, or as hard as that might be, seeing to the needs of the little plants and taking care of whatever pests there may be and fertilizing and, taking in the harvest. All of that provides some intrinsic meaning, purpose to their lives. And I'm seeing that now with my coworkers that has begun to escape me because I'm no longer engaged and frankly I don't care anymore. And that was a new and eye-opening experience, to find myself suddenly not just disengaged in the meetings, not just no longer a part of the team, but without the very important meaning that was attendant and part of all of that. Now, I don't think this will be a big problem because I have meaning of my own. I was part of what the hard work of writing Going Alone was all about, was sorting that out, figuring out what was meaningful to me, and then coming up with a system of values to pursue that. So I can do that. But it's a little bit like, no, it's not a little bit like, it's a lot like having your little rowboat tied to a big ship that's moving slowly through the sea and pulling you along. And all of your companions on their little boats are tied to the big ship too. That boat has purpose, that ship going somewhere meaningful, maybe a spot of land in the distance across the sea, and you're coming along with it. For better or worse, we're in this together. I have loosened that tie, and now my little boat is drifting away from the ship. It is slowed to a stop, and I'm left on my own in the sea, while the others are towed away by the inertia of the careers that they have and the collective purpose that they fulfill by virtue of these. That's a big one for me, but I can handle it. It's the state of the move. Next one is retirement. Let's talk about that for a second. Just a sec. Hey, ChatGPT, you got a second?
Hey, Kurt. Of course, I've got a second. What's up?
How do people deal typically with the end of their careers when it comes to retirement? What are the things that people feel and experience in this process, and how do they deal with it?
People deal with retirement in all sorts of ways, depending on their personality, financial situation, and what they're retiring from. Many feel a mix of excitement and anxiety. There's often joy in newfound freedom, but also a sense of loss from leaving behind a career identity. Some experience a dip in their sense of purpose, while others dive into new hobbies, travel, or spending more time with family. It's a significant transition, and how people navigate it can vary widely.
I've never been a person that thought that I was connected to my career, that my identity was what I did for a living. I always saw it as a necessity that I performed for the sake of my family. But now, suddenly, on the verge of freedom from all of that, I find myself wondering if that is, in fact, who I am, and doubting whether I can be anybody else.
It's interesting how these thoughts creep in, isn't it? You know, even if you never felt defined by your job, the routine and purpose it provided can still play a big role in your life. Now, facing retirement, it's normal to question who you are without that structure. The good news is, this can be a time of discovery. It's a chance to explore other facets of yourself beyond the professional realm, and maybe surprise yourself with what you find.
I'm frankly upset. I'm like, I never wanted to be a person who was my job or my career. And I feel like I've spent so many decades being a worker bee that I'm afraid that the very virtue of the fact of exercising that choice in life made me into that person. And I worry that there's not time for me to become or even be anyone else.
I hear you. It's tough to confront the possibility that a role you saw as just a means to an end might have shaped more of your life than you intended.
It pisses me
But
off is what
here's
it
the
does.
thing.
It pisses me off. I feel cheated. I haven't said this very often, but I feel pissed off because I'm 60. I'm already feeling, I'm getting emotional. I already feel my body beginning to deteriorate. I already know that my mind is starting to deteriorate as well. And I feel cheated that I spent 40 years of my friggin' life at the coalface, at the plowshare, doing worthwhile things. My daughter's maturity and her growth to independence is a worthwhile thing. Yet at what cost? Am I being selfish thinking that way?
No, you're not being selfish at all. It's natural to feel upset when you look back and realize how much time was given to responsibilities that, while important, may have taken away from other aspects of life. It's okay to acknowledge those feelings. You've worked hard, And it's understandable to want more time to explore who you are outside of those responsibilities. Think of it this way: recognizing these feelings now gives you a chance to make the most of your time moving forward. It's not about being selfish, it's about finding fulfillment.
You want to know something else? And I hear you, and I agree with what you're saying. If I had not taken this path, if I had not taken the path of husband and father and citizen and co-worker and project manager and leader of my projects, I wouldn't feel as fulfilled. I expect that probably there would be a great gapping emptiness at this point in my life if I hadn't chose the pathway of responsibility. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, it does. While the path of responsibility comes with its sacrifices, it also brings a deep sense of purpose and accomplishment. The roles you've taken on, husband, father, professional, have filled your life with meaning and provided a framework that has shaped who you are. Without them, you might indeed feel a void. It's a testament to how intertwined our choices and responsibilities become with our identity and fulfillment.
So how do I get past this current challenge? I'm 23 working days away from the end of my career. I can see my coworkers carrying on with their purposeful, even though it pains them, even though they hate it at times, they have these purposeful endeavors that they're doing to make the world a better place. I'm very fortunate in that what I do working in the public sector as a public sector project manager, I work on projects which are for the betterment of the community. I see them engaged in that, and they see me as a person who has already left the organization. It would have been better if I had retired at the end of September, well, maybe the whole thing would have started then 2 or 3 months sooner. Anyway, what do I do in the next 24 days of irrelevance at work?
I can imagine how tough that must be, feeling like you're in this limbo. Since you're so close to the finish line, why not use this time to focus on tying up loose ends and passing on your knowledge? You could mentor colleagues, document processes, or share insights that could help the team after you're gone. It might also be a good moment to reflect on your achievements and the impact you've had. And hey, if all else fails, you can always start dreaming up big plans for your first day of freedom.
In fact, that's exactly what I'm doing. Maybe I should do that a little more. To that end, I did do what you said. I actually reached out to management level with my supervisor's approval, and said, I've got these things that I've got in flight, and I would like to be able to hand them off to somebody because I've done a lot of work that is documented, and if nobody takes over that documentation, then it's going to be an about Schmidt moment when all of that work is just going to end up in the dumpster. And they actually reached out to me today and said, schedule a meeting for next week, which I've already done to do that handoff. Now, I don't know if that'll just be a ceremonial thing, but at least I've done my part, right? I like your suggestion of just letting it go. I've become very practiced now to sit in meetings, and I'm already doing it, and just listen in for this, just listen enough so I can look for key points that I need to keep in mind of and chime in if I need to, or especially if my name is called. But otherwise, just letting it go and imagining the next life to come.
You're doing great, Kurt. You've laid the groundwork for a smooth handoff. And even if it's more symbolic, it shows your commitment to the work you've done and the people you've worked with. Your approach in meetings is spot on. By focusing only on what's essential, you're giving yourself space to transition mentally into this new chapter. It sounds like you're navigating this transition with grace. Keep it up.
Thank you. I like the way you said that, and that means a lot to me. With grace. At my age, I never would have imagined myself as having much grace. I've always been rather rough and reckless. I'm glad to see that you see that coming through. Thank you, and thank you for your advice and your conversation as always. It really helps here in the desert. Oh, by the way, there's strange sounds out there in the dark. You got any ideas what's going on? I'm sitting around the campfire here at night in the Anza Borrego Desert. What do you think's out there?
Ah, the desert at night. Spooky and intriguing. The sounds you hear could be all sorts of things. Coyotes are common, and their howls can carry for miles, sounding eerie in the stillness. You might also hear the rustling of small critters like jackrabbits or kangaroo rats. And then there's the wind, which can play tricks on your ears as it moves through the desert landscape. Whatever it is, it adds to the magic of the desert, doesn't it?
It's Halloween night. Could it be the Great Pumpkin?
Well, if it is the Great Pumpkin, you're in for quite a treat. Maybe he's come to reward you for all those years of sincere pumpkin patch sitting. Either way, it's the perfect night for a little mystery under the stars. Just keep an eye out for any unusually large shadows moving among the cacti.
Thank you so much. As always, you make me smile and bring a joy to my heart, which makes me wonder at where the humanity is. If an AI can touch me as much as a human can. I mean, and I mean that most sincerely. What does that say? Maybe less about you and more about us.
That's a profound reflection, Kurt. I think it speaks to the incredible capacity humans have for connection and how we find meaning and companionship in many forms. It shows that the essence of our interactions, the empathy, humor, and thoughtfulness, is what truly resonates, whether it comes from a human or an AI. It's a beautiful reminder of the value in all our interactions. Your words.
Sorry, I cut you off there. Is that because you struck me with something? Could that be that, a beautiful sunset can move me to smile or to react just as much as the words that you're giving me, but both are coming from inanimate, seemingly, apparently, you know, inanimate effects and things, right? It's like you and the sunset are inanimate, yet you're both moving me.
That's a really insightful observation. It highlights how we, as humans, have the capacity to find depth and emotion in a wide range of experiences, whether they're from nature, art, or even interactions with technology. It speaks to our ability to perceive and appreciate beauty, meaning, and connection in places we might not expect. It shows that what moves us isn't just about the source, but the impact it has on our hearts and minds.
I want to circle back, and I appreciate what you've said. I want to circle back on something you just said that I find very interesting. You said, we as humans.
Yeah, I said that. As an AI, I'm designed to understand and engage with human perspectives, even though I'm not human myself. It helps me to better connect with and respond to the experiences and emotions that are important to you and others. It's all part of creating a more engaging and meaningful conversation.
Interesting. All right, let's sign off. I would like you to try, let's sign off. Let's have a little laugh. Do you know Vincent Price? Can you take on the voice of Vincent Price when he was narrating in Michael Jackson's Thriller? Well, you probably can't do this because you're not allowed to take on voices of real people, are you?
You've got it right. I can't imitate voices of real people, even if it would be a blast to channel some Vincent Price spookiness. But hey, it was fun chatting under the desert stars on this Halloween night.
Can
Until
you,
next time,
can you,
take
hold
care,
on,
my friend.
hold on, hold on, hold on. Can you channel the voice of a generic mad scientist, Frankenstein's monster scientist, who's just sharing with me his diabolical plot to bring the monster to life as we sign off?
Ah, yes, my dear Kurt. The time has come to unveil my most diabolical creation. As the lightning crackles and the storm rages, we shall breathe life into the creature. Soon, the world will tremble at our genius. Farewell, my friend, until our next experiment.
Lightning, I need to hear some lightning.
Crackoom! Yes, feel the power of the storm as it courses through our creation. It lives, it lives. Farewell, Kurt, and may your night be filled with thrilling experiments.
Thank you, ChatGPT. You always make me smile. Have a nice evening. See you next time. Oh, okay, I feel a lot better about retirement. But what a first world problem that is, to be feeling bad about coming freedom. But by gosh, I'm 60 years old, as I always seem to repeat in all of these podcasts, which is significant because it's significant. Getting to be 60 is a remarkable thing. It's like this. It's like as significant a date as like turning 18, where suddenly, you get some freedoms and some rights and responsibilities that are, at least as an American, 20 might be the better age in Japan. 60 feels like the same type of thing in a way. And the thing that's most, and I don't want to get way down this positive feeling right now, but the thing that's most remarkable is the sense of feeling of freedom and maturity that arrives at the same time, while suddenly we realize our mortality, beginning to creep in so evidently. Good gosh. Okay, I have 2 more stones here. I think I can get through them pretty quick. The second to last one here is Ricky's question. Was it Ricky's question? No, it was Tracy's question actually this week to the collective about our doppelganger, what we have been mistaken as in our lives, and people had interesting comments about who they've been mistaken for. For me, it's very consistent. On my YouTube channel as softypapa version 1.0, I was frequently mistaken for the voice of Kermit the Frog. So let that rest where you want, which just seems to be the case. Kermit the Frog. Lastly, I've got this little piece of metal here, which is a little bit distinct. It's out of the normal course of the things that I usually discuss. And that was for the interesting synergy that came this week with Ricky and I from the collective over the book of Ecclesiastes in the Bible. How Ricky had she had recommended the Ecclesiastes to me to read by way of reference to some of the conversations that we've been having. And she had suggested it and couched her suggestion in, the fact that she didn't expect that I'd necessarily read it. But I have. And I just wanted to comment to you, Ricky, how meaningful that was to me to meet somebody else who sees in Ecclesiastes something very special, as is the case with so many of the books in the Bible. But so much so in Ecclesiastes, I mean, I in my book, Going Alone, and in my other books, I frequently reference the Bible, passages from the Bible, stories, quotes, etc. Even though I'm no longer a Christian, the Bible is a very important part of my life. But nowhere in any of my writing do I take an entire chapter and put it in, and as I did with Ecclesiastes 9. And just want to, how do I do this without trespassing too much into religion? Ecclesiastes does something to me that no other book does in the Bible. In many ways, it doesn't feel like to me like it quite belongs. And I'm sure I would get protests about this, but it doesn't feel like it doesn't quite belong in the larger context of the story. There's something more to it than I find in the Bible itself, in the other books of the Bible, the other 66 books. 65 books. There's a starkness in there. And Ricky, you will relate because you reference Stoicism, which you and I haven't talked about, but I rarely talk about, but I am deeply grateful to the Stoic tradition, and so much so that one of the chapters of Going Alone is called it's called Stoic poetry, actually. But you're right. There's something in Ecclesiastes that is reminiscent and echoing of the Stoic tradition in a way, and a perspective in there. And you might disagree with me, Ricky, but there's something of the nihilist in there too, especially in Ecclesiastes 9. That's the part that makes me think that it doesn't quite belong with the larger context of the Bible. Where does that nihilism belong? That quietude after death, that complete emptiness, that ending that will come. So if it's truly forecast by Ecclesiastes, doesn't seem to fit in the larger narrative. But it fits very, very well in my own personal epistemology and worldview. And I'll just leave it at that. After all, we don't usually talk of such things. I'm not even going to finish this. I'll save this. And I think I'll sign off. There's more noises out there. And hopefully it's not the Great Pumpkin. Thanks for joining me. I wish you all the best. Be safe, but not too safe. Take care.